see the narrative that is being put out by President Trump today versus what Iran is saying, which is that no talks are happening. Which one right now are you most likely to believe?
Happy to be with you, and I can't speculate on that one. There's clearly a deal to be cut here. It's just a little unclear who in Iran you're going to cut it with. So even if talks are going on, who are they talking to? The Speaker of Parliament is emerging as a power broker, but he said he's not the one. The new Supreme Leader still hasn't been seen in public. They're doing voice. The foreign minister never had any real power, and Larijani, who did have some real power and was seen as a pragmatist, if not a moderate, the Israelis killed him last week. So hard to see who in Iran has the authority to cut a deal if one were to be had.
The president tried to make the point earlier that because we've damaged their communications to such an extent in Iran that maybe not everybody knows that we're in talks with one party versus another with competing factions here. I don't know if you buy into that, Anja, but wouldn't this administration have to at some point have tandem negotiations with the secular and religious leadership of Iran?
I think to bring this to a conclusion, you would need both. There's another piece going on here, which apparently at the lower level, in Iran, there's very low morale. Some people from the IRGC not wanting to come to work, normal, really discouraged because of this ongoing bombing. So I think there are people in Iran who are going to want to make a deal, and let's just all hope we get there soon.
Well, so to make a deal, I just wonder, Anja, if we should be thinking about this as just a deal through the lens of U.S. and Iranian negotiators. Israel is also party to this conflict. They have been acting in tandem with the United States. As you mentioned, it's Israel who has been leading in large part the decapitation effort of major parts of the Iranian leadership. How are they going to play a role here? Are they as likely to want to reach some kind of diplomatic off-ramp as the U.S. at this point?
Yeah, so far we've seen Israel and the U.S. have parallel but not identical goals for this war. Depending on who you're listening to on the U.S. side, we're hearing the U.S. seeks to degrade Iran's military ability to threaten us or the region. That is achievable. Regime change with a regime that comes out better than what we've had before is much more difficult, and frankly probably won't happen right away. If you do see real regime change in Iran, that could be months to a year out. So slightly divergent views here on what Israel and the United States want.
Anja, bringing us the view again from Aspen Strategy Group, and it's interesting how little we know at this moment, Kayleigh. We woke up to some pretty major breaking news, and we've heard from the commander-in-chief twice today, yet we're still asking the same questions we were this morning.
Well, and in part, we're asking those questions because what the commander-in-chief is saying is not necessarily tracking with the Iranian talking points at this point, which are that we are not at this time seeking a deal. We are not speaking with you. And Iran, of course, suggesting that what the president is trying to do here is in response to energy markets. They refer to this once again, as we have seen frequently throughout this conflict, as this being psychological warfare, something that is intended to drive energy prices down. And whether or not that was the intent, it is the outcome we are seeing today with oil prices down about 9% on both Brent and WTI. Brent is actually getting closer and closer to breaking below that $100 a barrel level right now.
How about that? This is interesting. And we're watching the gains start to pick up again. The S&P 500 is up 80 points now. Still a far cry from what we saw earlier, but investors are trying to get their heads around both sides of this story that we're trying to illuminate here with Anja. Anja, how long does the president have before he needs to detail this a bit more carefully for the markets to understand? Because these questions will need to be answered.
Yeah, as you said, the markets are in turmoil. I used to be a director of a shipping company. And of course, the question on everyone's mind is how fast can you really reopen the Straits of Hormuz? It's probably weeks until you can get some tankers through there. This is a very difficult military operation. We don't have a lot of allies willing to go in with us now. So let's say you get some tankers through in the next week or a couple of weeks, great. But for spot markets on these tankers to return to normal and insurance rates to return to normal, that might take much longer, probably months.
Okay, so let's talk about that commercial shipping aspect and the control Iran has been able to exercise around the Strait of Hormuz. There have been a number of military, of geopolitical strategists who have been on the show with Joe and I suggesting so long as Iran has shown it's able to maintain that control, Iran will come out the winner ultimately of this conflict. Even if we are to see a diplomatic off-ramp specifically targeting the nuclear program, as President Trump suggested, the idea that Iran is willing to abandon efforts around a nuclear weapon and relinquish existing nuclear material. If we're still left in a world in which Iran effectively can decide to choke off the strait at any point, is that actually a good outcome for the global economy?
I agree with that worry. And exactly as you said, Kayleigh, it's deeply unclear where this goes. You've seen the Houthis, a far lesser military power than Iran, wreaking a lot of havoc in the Red Sea. And so this is something that everyone who has studied conflict in the Middle East knew that this was Iran's trump card, and that closing the Straits of Hormuz is the first thing they would do if really they were pushed. And you're seeing that. And it is something that continues possibly for a long time if the strife continues in this region. I think it's a real worry.
If there's no deal in 5 days, Anja, we go back to the original threat. We will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. What would this market look like if that happened?
Look, the threats by the United States to hit power plants and others in Iran is probably credible and to be taken seriously. But Iran also has a vote here, and you've already seen by their attacks on Qatar, which took out 17% of LNG capacity, that they can just retaliate right back. So this is mutually assured destruction on people's electricity and energy infrastructure. And so I hope very much that we're going to get to a deal before any of that happens.
Well, and when we consider that energy infrastructure, just the flow of energy out of this region, President Trump has repeatedly said, Anja, that we don't actually need the oil and natural gas coming out of the Middle East, that trying to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is more a favor for other countries like China. How do you think the Chinese are watching these developments right now? Do you think that they buy it, or are they still actively pursuing workarounds to try to make sure that their energy flows do not get cut off?
Yeah, they're definitely pursuing workarounds. As you all know, 80 to 90% of the oil and gas that comes through the Straits of Hormuz goes to Asia. Asia deeply impacted by this. This has been hard on China. The oil shock is real. China has had to absorb some of the price shock, the government, and not pass it through. But China's also winning from this conflict. So they're now able to position themselves as the actor of stability. That's what they're telling the global South. And by the way, it gives China even more materials leverage than they originally had. For example, 80% of global tungsten, which is a key ingredient to all of these munitions that are being fired, comes from China. So this is giving the Chinese even more leverage.
You said you ran a shipping company, Anja. In our minute or so that we have remaining, what are these crews going through out there? They've been bobbing around for 3 weeks, I think, at some point. Did they have supplies? Did they have food? I can only imagine morale on board.
Yeah, I did not run a shipping company. I was on the board. I'm a director of a shipping company. This is very dangerous, and people don't like to put their crews in danger. They're not armed. These are civilians. And so you really have to have nearly 100% security. You know, you heard the president saying a few days ago, well, they should just be more courageous. But that's not, no, in their right mind is going to put them away in a way that they would be if they were running